33 years of basically doing research in consciousness, changing a variable, see what had happened, change it again, hold that variable still, change another variable, and see what affected what. What was connected, how were they connected, what enabled you to do it, what inhibited you from doing it. So about 33 years worth of that. I thought I understood enough about consciousness to write it down. And that's when I started writing the My Big Toe books. Mainly that was a theory of consciousness, but I also knew that it has to also be a theory of the physical world as well. Because one of the things I learned doing this is that consciousness is fundamental and the physical world is not. And I learned that because I could do things within consciousness that changed or affected the physical world.
Right.
But I couldn't do anything in the physical world that actually fundamentally changed consciousness. So the arrow of causality was from consciousness to the physical. So knowing that consciousness was fundamental, then the physical world had to be derivable from the understanding of consciousness and how consciousness worked. And I worked on that problem, and probably about 2-3 years after I'd published the My Big Toe books, I got a couple of aha moments, and I was able to derive quantum physics directly. So quantum physics has some big mysteries in it. Why should reality be probability at the bottom level? You drill down into reality. When you get to the bottom, you don't find little particles, you find probability. And also, and these things came out of the double slit experiment, which was 1915 to 1925 is kind of when that was taking place. The other thing they found out was that
this is the observer effect, right?
Yeah, the observer effect, that what the human knew, the information he knew would change what the result of the experiment was. So that was the observer effect. If he knew these facts, then you get one answer from the experiment. If he didn't know those facts, you'd get a different answer. So that said that we were entangled some way with our reality. It wasn't just that, there was this physical reality, and the idea that reality was physical was thrown out because the way you compute things in the physical reality is with probability, not with particles. And the physicists that are the atom smashers, the ones that go to CERN and bang particles into targets or into each other and look at what comes out the other side, they will all tell you, and it's pretty much an accepted idea in physics, that reality is not matter-based, it's information-based. Mm-hmm.
They will tell you that?
Yeah, they will tell you that. Physics, that's a pretty accepted viewpoint in physics, that reality is information-based. Now, they won't go any further than that because they don't know what the next step is. And actually, the founding fathers of quantum physics, which would have been, Bohr and Planck and Schrodinger and Heisenberg, all those guys, and then eventually Einstein came over and joined them as well. They also came to the conclusion that consciousness was fundamental. You get quotes from all of those guys with that as their takeaway from doing the double slit experiment. Consciousness was fundamental. You can dig up a quote of Einstein writing to Bohm, who was a kind of a student co-worker with him, saying that I know that consciousness has to be at the root and has to be fundamental, but I have no idea how to turn that into physics. I have no idea what to do with that.
Right.
So they knew that consciousness was fundamental because that's what the experiment told them.
Well, the crazy thing about physics and consciousness is it doesn't make sense. There's no path to consciousness from dead matter.
Right, but there is a path the other way.
Right.
There is a path from consciousness to physics. So with the physicists, ever since the double split, the physicists have realized there was some paradigm, some shift in the way that you look at reality that would make quantum physics be rational. They call quantum physics just weird science. Nobody will ever understand quantum physics. That was a quote from a Nobel laureate. But anyway, so they were looking for this new paradigm shift that would enable them to understand what happened with the double slit, understand quantum physics. And now it's been 100 years. 2025 was 100 years later. No progress, not even a small step forward in coming up with that paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I came up with that paradigm shift. I understand that. I can derive quantum physics from consciousness, from an understanding of consciousness. So that is, the big Tao. It's a theory of everything. I found out that not only could I explain quantum physics, but I could explain relativity. The big unknown there is, why is the speed of light a constant? It's always a constant. You can't go slower, it can't go faster, it always goes just the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a source, like a flashlight, and the flashlight's going, 1/2 the speed of light, and then you turn the flashlight on, you'd expect the light coming out would go faster, it would go, 1.5 times the speed of light, but it doesn't. It's invariant to the velocity of the source. It always goes just the speed of light. And that I was able to show logically as well, why that works. And then the neat thing is that once you understand consciousness, you not only can derive the objective world, which is basically physics, you can also derive a scientific model of the subjective world. And then you can understand why some people are happy and some people aren't. You can understand what we're here for. What's the purpose of us being here, and how are we here? And it all falls out logically and scientifically. No assumptions. The only assumption in it is that consciousness exists. Everything else is just logic, and it's science. It also tells you, it informs it makes changes in metaphysics. It answers all the paradoxes in metaphysics. It answers all the paradoxes in physics. Physics has a lot of paradoxes that they know things are like this, but they don't know why. The speed of light and the quantum physics are just two of those. There's a whole bunch of those. It's like I came up with about 35 of them, and this model answers all of those paradoxes. So I guess that's kind of how I got there, is that I worked on it for many, many years, trying to understand how consciousness worked, and I worked from the inside. So I could do those things. I could heal. I could, remote view. I could do those and see how they were affected.
What do you mean heal?
Heal. You can use your mind to modify the problem. Well, heal. Somebody's ill. You can heal them with your mind. That's a real thing. You can do that. Matter of fact,
You've done that?
Oh, sure. I've done that many times. About, 10, 15 years ago, I was giving a talk in the basement of a church, because that's a very cheap venue. And it was in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had 2 PhD theologians there, was the minister and the assistant minister. And the idea just hit me. So I stopped what I was saying. I was telling people sort of things I've told you. I was telling people the larger conscious system and so on. And I asked them, I said, well, you two are theologians, right? And they said, yes. And I said, tell me, what are the characteristics of God? Now, I don't want, dogma. I just want the fundamental characteristics. What are the attributes of God in general? And they did. They went and huddled and came back about 10 minutes later, and here was their list, and they had about 6, 7 things on there that was the attributes of God. Every one of them was an attribute of the larger consciousness system. And when I didn't expect that. I thought maybe 1 or 2 or 3 might be, but all of them were. And after that, I started thinking about it. Well, this model has also derived God. What is God? Where does it come from? Well, it's the larger consciousness system. It's the source of everything. Oh, yes, we are created in its image. We're little pieces that are the same piece of consciousness with memory and processing and whatever. We're virtual machines inside the larger machine, and it all kind of fell together. That's what most people talk about when they talk about God functionally, the attributes. But now the larger conscious system isn't perfect. It's not supernatural. It's natural. It doesn't know everything all the time, but it can know everything, but it has to focus its intention. It has to focus here or focus there. And if it focuses everywhere at once, then it doesn't get the fidelity that it does if it focuses various places. So it's a consciousness system. And then that says that it has all those same functions that we ascribe to God. So not only does this theory of everything do physics and do psychology and do metaphysics and do philosophy, but it also does theology. And that answers some of the big questions in theology. But where's God come from? And how did that start and on? Well, it all goes back to that original cell of consciousness that could just be a 1 or a 0, and it evolved from that state. So yes, and I've had any number of people that, this one lady, she was a nurse, and I can't remember where, in Colorado, I think, and she wrote to me, and she said, I am a very religious person. I consider myself to be very religious. I take religion very seriously, and I always have. And she went on to say, wherever I go now, I always carry 2 books with me, the Bible and my big toe. She says, I love your work because everything that was mysterious that I didn't understand, I understand it now, and it all makes perfect sense to me.
Interesting.
So I've had a number of people, and what I expected when I wrote the books is that the people who were very religious would not like my big toe very much. That they would, I'd find them on the negative side of that, but I haven't. Mostly, I've found people who are religious to think that it's a really good idea because suddenly all the things that they were taught have a scientific foundation under them rather than a mystical foundation under them. And it's the same with the paranormal stuff. Everything paranormal is easily, turned into logic and science. That's just the way consciousness works. Consciousness are netted.
So if the larger consciousness is God, that means we are all also God.
We're also pieces of that system.
We're God.
And we have all of its attributes, but at a smaller package. Okay? Well, think of the computer thing. You have the mainframe, and then you have Then you have 10,000 users, and each one of those users has a little bit of memory and a little bit of, a little bit of processing and so on.
We're all pieces of it.
We're all pieces.
Right.
So we have the same general attributes of God. We are pieces of that larger conscious system, but we're in a smaller package. We don't have the capacity that it has, because it has the capacity to fit in all of us and everything else. But we have all the same things. We can evolve the quality of our consciousness to that same level of being love. So we can duplicate that. We're not limited other than in resources. We have limited resources. It doesn't seem to. It has limited resources too, but it's much bigger. The larger conscious system knows most everything that has happened because it's all in that database that it collects on all the decisions and choices and so on. So it's got all that data collected, and it has omniscience in the sense that it can look at everything that's going on and why it's going on. So because we're pieces of it. The mainframe can look at all the users and what the users are doing and how they're doing it. The mainframe, it's just a piece of the mainframe. So the mainframe isn't locked out of that. They're just using a piece of that mainframe. So it's the same thing. So yes, the mainframe can know what's going on, but the future is not a done deal, because if the future is a done deal, then there are no choices. If there are no choices, there is no free will. If there is no free will, there's no consciousness. Consciousness, I define as awareness with a choice. That's it, awareness with a choice. Free will is necessary for consciousness. If there are no choices, then there is nothing. There's no growth, there's no evolution, there's no change. If it's all fixed, then there's nothing happening. It's the zero set, so there's no purpose to it. It's just done, finished. It's a so what. You know, there's nothing significant ever. And that doesn't build a system. You can't build a system out of that. So the idea that this is a deterministic. Now the physicists will like to say this is deterministic because they want to say that if I knew the state vector of every particle in the universe, I could compute everything that would happen from there on. But that's nonsense. It doesn't work like that. Physicists who want to believe that matter is at the bottom, even though their experiments tell them that they're not, they paint themselves in a corner. There's two logical positions that are totally opposite, and you can't mix them. One is that this is deterministic and materialistic. If it's materialistic, it has to be deterministic. Those two are a match set. They go together. On the opposite corner, philosophically, you have consciousness, time, and free will. Those three have to exist. If you take any one of them away, the other two can't make it. Consciousness needs choice. Conscious of what? Doing what? You know, it has to have input. You have to have choice, this input or that input. You have to have choice. How do you interpret the data? So if you don't have choice, you don't have free will. If you don't have free will, there is no point in consciousness. Consciousness doesn't really exist. It's not, there's nothing to do. It's all been done.
Right.
So it's like I say, it's the zero. It's starting at zero. There's nothing. Nothing can change. Nothing can grow. Nothing can evolve. Nothing can ever be learned. It's just nothing. So that you can't make a system out of nothing doing nothing.
Right.
So I find that to be kind of an irrational space to be. The rational space is, yes, there is growth, there is change, there is time. If you have a choice, you have to have time before the choice, after the choice. So the physicists will have to tell you that this is deterministic, there is no free will, and there is no consciousness, and there is no time. All of those are imaginary things that we believe, but they're not true. And all of that's BS. What do you mean there's no time and there's no learning and there's that doesn't make any sense. That's because they misinterpret one of Einstein's equations. They get that, but there is time, there is free will, and there is choice. And that free will is kind of sacred in the world of consciousness. That's what, if you don't have free will, then again, you don't have anything.
Right.
So you need all three of those: time, choice, and awareness. All of those together have to be, as a set. Just like materialism and determinism have to go as a logical set. And you can't have one foot in this camp and one foot in that camp and still be rational.
Right.
To be rational, you have to be in this one, or at least consistent. You have to be in this one or that one, or you're logically inconsistent. So that's the choice. The zero set that does nothing goes nowhere, and the set that evolves and grows and creates, that's the set that is what I experience.
You all right?